All right. Well, I know we've got a lot to talk about tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Welcome to the Colorado Coalition for the Homelessness Education Series. We do these on the third Thursday of most months about a topic and its intersection with homelessness. My name is Alexis Whittam. I'm the Director of Communications for the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and we're really excited about today. We're going to be talking about libraries, schools, transportation, how we do alliance building, and how we provide services in homelessness support outside of the traditional sector in a lot of ways. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our usual kind of housekeeping materials for everyone to know. I apologize. It says live interpretation. We don't have live interpretation tonight. We didn't have any requests for that. So that was actually a note from last month. But we do have captioning. So if you would like to turn on captioning, please use in the bottom, you'll see the CC. You can turn on captioning and it should use AI essentially to translate what we're saying. If you need someone to slow down when speaking, please put it in the chat and we'll try to accommodate that to make sure that everything's being captured. The agenda and format, we try to make this educational for the community at large. So we know that we often get requests for services and links, and we will try to provide some of that in the chat and in the follow-up email. But mostly we're talking big picture, general services rather than one person's request for help. So just want to let folks know that sometimes people show up and then they're disappointed that we're not able to serve them directly. And so just want to put that on everyone's radar. If you're viewing this webinar as a participant, your camera and microphone is off. It's in webinar format, which means, it's 5 o'clock. You can do the dishes or, be on a train ride home. So you can enjoy it in that way. It means you can't participate in the traditional sense, but we do have a chat function to introduce yourselves to each other and to the panelists. And also please use the Q&A function to ask questions for our panelists. We're essentially going to cover a little data. We're going to talk for 45 minutes with pre-planned questions. And then at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for questions that you all have submitted. So please do use the Q&A function to submit. This session is being recorded. We just like folks to know that we record them all. We know not everyone can make it in the moment. So we record it. We'll have it on YouTube probably by Monday of next week. And for anyone who signed up, we'll send you that link to the video. We'll also send you the slideshow. So you don't have to worry about taking notes. If something really interests you, we'll have it in follow-up. If you do want to share on social media, we use the hashtag CCHEd series. And then below, we have all the many handles for everyone who's here today. If you miss someone and you want to get a handle, just put it in the chat and someone on our team can, make sure you have the right person that you want to reach out to if you do want to share on social. So in order to start with our sort of data presentation on our topic today, I'm going to hand it to Andrew West, my colleague, who is our Housing Policy Fellow, and we'll let Andrew take it from here, and then we'll introduce our panelists. So thanks, Andrew.
Great. Thanks for passing it over, Alexis. I always appreciate your intro. I'm just going to provide a quick background, some information before we pass it to our expert panel today and share a bit more on why libraries, transit, schools, and more are so important to a lot of our folks who are experiencing homelessness. Oftentimes, a lot of these spaces are the only public, truly free space in a city or town. A lot of spaces throughout can be inaccessible, burdensome, or outright hostile to people who are experiencing homelessness. For example, a lot of businesses might require that you make a purchase if you're looking to use the restroom or even occupy the space. But on the other hand, we have spaces like libraries where you can get internet access or use a computer, which we know is super crucial to people who are looking to apply for jobs, access benefits, and all sorts of things that we all do on the internet that are just have become a part of day-to-day living. As we enter the winter here, we know the importance of shelter, and we know that a lot of our folks who are experiencing homelessness often just need a place to stay warm during those cold months. It's important to highlight that libraries can be a place where you can get connected to resources. It can be a gathering space where people come to meet, and a lot of our libraries provide services as well, which we'll hear a bit more from our panelists later. And I think another thing is that there's a good atmosphere. I think a lot of times it can be chaotic when people are experiencing homelessness, and it kind of forces people into a constant state of emergency, just trying to get their basic needs met. And these places can be, especially libraries, can be chill environments where you can kind of relax for a bit. And I think it's important to note that beyond just being a public space that is accessible, a lot of our libraries have gone out of the way, have gone have made intentional steps to create policies that are trying to help people with lower incomes and people experiencing homelessness. Uh, I always say that the budget is a moral document, and Denver voters showed this with their support on Measure 2I last year, in 2022, that would increase funding for the Denver Public Libraries by an additional $32 million a year that allows them to provide better services, some of which goes to our folks experiencing homelessness. Another interesting policy topic here is the Library Services for the Poor, which was brought forward by the American Library Association that affirmatively lays out some guidelines to enabling people to participate fully in a democratic society, and recognizing the importance that libraries have in doing that. And in this act, it lays out 15 policy proposals for how they can expand that access. So again, not only is this a space where people can come and gather, but they're doing things affirmatively to go out of their way. And again, that internet, that portion is huge for people who don't have personal access. It can be really a large barrier to accessing resources like housing. And again, I think we'll hear more from our panelists on this later, but one thing that the Denver Public Library does is actually employs social workers that provide outreach to some of our people who are experiencing homelessness and helps connect them to services. And in 2015, they were only seeing 434 individuals, and the number of contacts increased drastically over the next 3 years to over 4,000 people. And I think it's also worth noting at the time that there weren't many cities doing that. I saw a 2018 report that estimated about 30 library systems across the country are now doing a program like this where they employ social workers. So great to see our Denver library is taking the lead in there. And transitioning a bit to the education system, I think oftentimes students experiencing homelessness can be hard to identify, but it can include those who are part of an unhoused traditional family unit, teens who might have left their family of origin, people in foster care, or those who have aged out of foster care. I think youth and family homelessness can often be hidden. One survey showed that nearly 1.1 million children and youth experiencing homelessness were reported by school districts in 2020 and 2021. Of those, 77% were staying with others due to a temporary loss of their housing, which is often known as doubling up. Only 11% were in shelters, and only 4.5% were unsheltered. So when we talk about, I think a lot of times people tend to focus on the aspect of homelessness that is more visible. And I think children, youth, and families can be sometimes left out of that. And one important way that the education system serves people experiencing homelessness is through the McKinney-Vento Act, which was passed in 1987 and is a primary piece of legislation related to protections and funding for people who are experiencing homelessness, particularly children and youth that lack a fixed, regular nighttime residence and qualify for the program. And specific provisions of the McKinney-Vento Act ensure protections for people who are experiencing homelessness. It provides access to a liaison. It provides outreach and coordination activities, enrollment in schools, choice between schools, and a lot of other great things for people. And they also do a count of students that are experiencing homelessness regularly. I don't think we've got 2022-23 data yet, but I could be mistaken there. But the last survey from 2021-2022 showed about 18,000 students who are experiencing homelessness or doubled up. And last thing I'll talk about briefly here before we pass it to our panels is transit system, the importance of getting around for people who are experiencing homelessness. This is something that's absolutely essential, like it is just for all of us. It's not something that's nice to have. This is really a very basic need. And oftentimes purchasing, maintaining, keeping up with your own vehicle can be prohibitively expensive for a lot of folks who are struggling to meet their housing needs. And I think like the rest of the population, it can be important to get to medical appointments, case management meetings, lease up for housing, work, shelter, whatever that may be. And trains, buses, and shelter trains and buses are a very important way that people do that. I mentioned earlier the need to stay warm during these cold Colorado months. That can certainly be something that transit helps with as well. It's important to note that RTD has offered some programs. They've offered programs like the Live program, which offers a discount, a 40% discount to people that are under 185% of the federal poverty level, and between the ages of 20 and 64. They've also piloted a program that was a zero fare. I think last year it was just in August, and they expanded it in 2023 to include the whole summer. That was free ridership for all patrons. Um, and another thing, as the RTD has updated their code of conduct, we at the coalition have advocated for provisions that benefit our unhoused neighbors and push back against others that could have potentially targeted people experiencing homelessness. We like to advocate for rules that clearly identify um, potential harm to customers and sort of uh, mitigate those as they come about. And certainly don't want to have any rules in the code of conduct that might profile people experiencing homelessness or limit their access. Because, like I said earlier, this is a very basic need for a lot of our folks. And with that, I can pass it back there. Thank you very much, Alexis.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it as always, and it helps to sort of set the tone for what we're going to talk about. So now I would like to introduce all of our panelists. I'm going to sort of give a little bit of information on them, but also the organizations they're at and what they do, because I know we have a lot of different folks in different sectors tonight. So we want to make sure to kind of explain what everyone does in their position as we go to get started. So first, I want to introduce Brianne Hansen. Brianne, MSW, serves as Community Resource Manager at the Denver Public Library. Community Resources is a department at DPL that prioritizes supporting people experiencing homelessness, poverty, and mental health and substance use challenges. DPL welcomes people from all walks of life as unhoused neighbors access libraries daily for heat, cold, resources, and entertainment. Staff members are considered the intermediate resource. Their main goal is to assist customers and connect them to community-based or city-based resources. Customers work with the community resource team voluntarily. There are no requirements to be able to work with the team, and services are confidential. Team members use a trauma-informed approach, believe in the autonomy and agency of customers, and work from a harm reduction lens. So welcome, Brianne. Next, we have Esther Rivera. Esther serves as the manager of federal programs for the Homeless Education Network, or HEN. The Homeless Education Network supports students experiencing homelessness to reduce barriers to educational success. Specific provisions in the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act ensure the enrollment, accessibility, and educational stability for students lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. HEN ensures district compliance of the McKinney-Vento Act through identification and outreach of students experiencing homelessness, support with immediate enrollment, transportation for eligible students, immediate access to free school meals and educational services for which they're eligible, referrals to internal DPS partners and external community partners, and support for unaccompanied youth, including FAFSA verification letters and more. So welcome, Esther. Kayla Rockhold, LCSW, has worked for Pikes Peak Library District since 2020 as the Community Resources Supervisor. Her department works to connect El Paso County residents to resources they need assistance locating. Many people come to the library knowing they can access information, but having the community resources staff available to help patrons navigate resources outside of the library services frees up the on-site library staff to assist patrons trying to connect to library materials, databases, programs, and classes. So welcome, Kayla. And finally, we have Director Joyanne Rusha, who serves on the Regional Transportation District, or RTD, Board of Directors. They represent District B, which covers northeast/far northeast Denver and north of Colfax in Aurora. Director Rusha sits on the Operations and Safety Committee, and some policy areas of interest at RTD include alternatives to policing, paratransit, and ADA issues, Vision Zero, increasing enrollment in our discount programs. Their day job is working at a nonprofit that advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So welcome, Director Rusha. Awesome. All right, well, now that I did all that, as we get started, we always like to start with, we had this data presentation at the beginning. It sort of sets the tone of what we're going to talk about and where we are right now. Is there anything you noticed in the presentation that stood out to you, or something that was really missing that you think is important context as we get started? And that question's for anyone.
I think one thing that surprised me was the data point about 1 in 3 people experiencing homelessness use the internet. And I don't know if that's just ever or who have regular access to it, but I know that our computer lab fills up very quickly as soon as we open the doors in any of our buildings. So I feel like that number might be off, but I also just might be misinterpreting how that data was laid out.
I think the data was that 1 in 3 don't use it at all, but that still seemed really high to us, that it was 33%. It was one article, so I will say, um, you know, that's one data source and it may have been pretty off.
Yeah, I'll also say with Caleb that was the one I was really surprised by. I know here at Denver Public Library, and especially the Central Branch or Corky Gonzalez or Blair Caldwell, folks are here specifically to use the internet. We also have a program at Denver Public Library, the Digital Inclusion Program, that really helps customers get on the affordable connectivity programs and tries to ensure that everyone can have access to connectivity.
Yeah,
All right.
I was
Oh,
surprised about that statistic as well, but I will share the source of that in the chat. That is from a study from the University of Southern California that said 1 in 3 people reported no internet usage in the past 3 months. So, but I'll be sharing that here in a sec.
thanks, Andrew. Okay. Andrew's amazing at data, so I trust him that he has the source there. Awesome. So great. We started on libraries, so that's a great place to continue. So Kayla and Brianne, you both work in community resources at library systems in Colorado, and we talked a little about it in your intros. But can you explain in your own words sort of how those programs work and how you meet the needs for library patrons? And I want to make sure we know we're talking about 2 different library systems. We're not going to talk about all libraries, but in the places you work, sort of how does that work and how do you serve patrons there?
Sure, I'm happy to start. I work for Denver Public Library, so that is the central library downtown, and then we have 26 branch locations. My team has 11 people on it. So myself, another supervisor, 3 resource navigators, and 6 peer navigators. At the Central Library, we are here Monday through Thursday from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. The Central Library has limited hours right now because of construction. And at the Central Library specifically, we have peer navigators that assist folks with connecting with resources. So that's filling out applications, whether that's for SNAP benefits, whether that's for housing applications. Basically, we sit down with folks and say, what is it that you need? And then how can we help you fill out that application or connect you with that? Our team also does a lot of relationship building. We see a lot of folks, especially at the central location, that don't access shelter. And the first step really to getting people engaged with services is to build a relationship, welcome them into the library, see what they need. At the Central Library, we also provide snacks, bottled water. We do hygiene, emergency hygiene items. We have an emergency clothing closet that we use, emergency cold weather gear. We want to make sure that when folks come into the Central Library, especially, that we're able to meet kind of those basic needs so that they're able to stay and really enjoy the other services here at the library, whether that's reading a book or hopping on the computer. At the Central Library last year, I believe we served 8,000 different individuals at the Central Library specifically. Last year, our program served over 11,000 individuals system-wide. With the other library locations, there's 26 locations, and our team goes out to all 26 of those locations to see if there's any folks that need to be connected to resources there as well. They bring snacks out, they bring different hygiene items. We really just want to make sure that people who enter our library buildings are really supported.
So I am with Pikes Peak Library District, which is in Colorado Springs, or actually all of El Paso County. Primarily, we are at our downtown location, the Penrose Library. My team has 4 members, myself, 1 other community resources specialist, and 2 peer navigators. Our library system, like I mentioned earlier, serves all of El Paso County. So we have 14 branches throughout the county. And we cover about 2,000 square miles. So it's quite a bit of space. We go to all but, I believe, 2 of the locations right now on a regular basis. But we are able to schedule appointments at any of the branches. We just don't do regular hours at 2 of the branches. My team's schedule is so varied that I'm not going to say what hours those are across the branches, but we do usually spend about 2 to 4 hours at different library branches throughout the month, and spread that out across the team pretty widely. So when we do meet with patrons, we don't have very many direct services, so we don't have clothing or snacks or anything like that. We're about I don't know, a block and a half from the local soup kitchen. So that's where people are going every day. So it would be a duplicative service for us to provide more than that, especially just with our locations. But we do connect people to those services. So if they are just coming into town, where do they go get lunch every day? Where are the shelters in town? How do they, if they're a veteran, access services for veterans? So just trying to get them connected to a real live person versus here's a guide, work it out yourself, which is kind of what the capacity of our library staff was before. It's a lot of work to get to know an entire county's worth of services, and we're kind of those experts in that area.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So shifting gears a little bit to talk transportation, Director Rusha, there have been efforts to amend RTD's code of conduct in ways that target people experiencing homelessness or appear to be unhoused. Can you talk about transit equity and how you perhaps push back on these efforts?
Yes. So first, thank you for having me here today. So we talk about the school to prison pipeline. There's also a transit to prison pipeline. In fact, the concept of broken windows policing theory actually got its jumpstart on the New York transit system. And that's not lost on me as an RTD director. Um, so earlier this year, as you noted, RTD proposed rules, and it wasn't for the first time, that would absolutely target unhoused customers. And some of these rules were things like, banning passengers from riding with nowhere to go or looking as though they had nowhere to go, banning the use of electrical outlets. I don't know about you, but I feel like I am always at 5 or 7% after a long day and I'm on the transit system. Um, Laying down on a bench, looking like you're about to fall asleep, and so forth and so on. And to be clear, most of these offenses that are currently in our code of conduct, they're not criminal offenses, right? But they might under our policy warrant a police response, and that could ultimately lead to some sort of infraction that could put a person in the criminal justice system, right? And it's also traumatic. Um, so there was a lot of community pushback, including from Colorado Coalition for the Homeless and other advocates. I worked with CCH and other organizations. We went to the agency. We asked for a community engagement process, which the agency did do, and I appreciate. They pulled back on a couple of those proposals, but even with that, I the the new code was still, I think, quite inequitable. There was a lot of problematic language that remained. So while even during the code vote, we were able to get a couple of good amendments in, including ones that we worked on with CCH. Ultimately, I was a yes on the amendments, but a no on the final package, not least of which because there were some constitutional concerns that I had. That being said, last month, Director Guzman and I were able to go back to the board and pass 4 more, minor amendments to the code, related to things like occupying seats, what constitutes significant impairment from drugs or alcohol, proper disposal of sharps, things like that, things that we were hoping would reduce, unfair targeting of the unhoused, or other at-risk populations. But that being said, we still have a lot of work to do. And, what is in the code, that's in the code. But data speaks and data means something. So the code was passed in June and went into effect immediately. And last month, I did an open records request as a director, and I asked for our citations and our suspensions for the last year, as well as suspensions and citations since the code had been passed. And while looking through the data, I found multiple infractions related to things like loitering, camping, trespassing, public urination, things like that. And while we don't know the individual histories or backgrounds of folks that were cited or suspended for those minor infractions, it is not unreasonable, excuse me, to infer that our policies are still unfairly targeting the unhoused. And so it's something that the board, as the policy making body of RTD, definitely needs to monitor and work with our GM CEO on, and look to find ways to ensure that we can have a safe transit system, but do so in a way that we aren't targeting individuals who are not causing the problems on our system, and who aren't the root cause of the issues that we're facing. And so one of the things I'd personally like to see is for RT to hire mental health staff and outreach staff, because ultimately cops aren't social workers. I don't think they want to be social workers, but we absolutely shouldn't be writing that into their job description. They shouldn't be social workers, they shouldn't be EMTs, and they shouldn't be customer service either. So I I feel a little bit bad compared to, what I said compared to our other panelists. I was listening and thinking, oh, that's so wonderful and so uplifting. And if you give me, I think later down in the panel, I'd love to share some other things that we're doing. But, we're also here to be honest and speak our truths. And you guys also, you see the news, and you see what RTD is dealing with. And I will also be honest in saying that some of RTD's response to a perceived problem is also the perception of the public. And, we can do better in part, I think, when we are pushed by people to do better. And so I just thank you for allowing me to be here today. And thanks for everyone in the audience as well for coming here to learn with us today.
Thank you for that answer. And, we always mention our advocacy network if anybody is interested in advocating with CCH on policies that are more usually specific to legislative session, but there's so many ways to get involved. And somebody sees those emails when you write them. So if you have thoughts on transit, send them through, and we can always add in the chat if you want any contact information, if you have thoughts. I want to be sure to talk about education because we haven't jumped into that yet. So Esther, the McKinney-Vento data on students experiencing homelessness reveals a different perspective from other estimates we have. So a lot of services count on the point in time count, or PIC count, which is a really specific way of counting people, and I think doesn't count a lot of folks experiencing homelessness, especially, as Andrew mentioned, folks who are not as visibly homeless. They're maybe doubled up. There's more people than should be in a house. And not enough space for everyone, or people who are new to homelessness, or maybe just not what a lot of folks think of as typically experiencing homelessness. So how do you and the Homeless Education Network sort of identify students and then serve them and their families in order to make sure that, their education needs are getting met as well as other needs?
Thank you so much for this question. And I also appreciated that comment from Andrew about the homeless families not being visible. I think that's very true. I hear it even internally here at DPS, like people don't want to see this and don't want to know this is happening. I think it's really, really hard to take all that in. So we identify families. Our definition is pretty broad, and you kind of read through it, inappropriate, inadequate. It's not like the HUD definition where they actually throw the word literal in there and like you have to be on the streets to be considered homeless. Our definition of homeless is a little bit broader, and it includes families who are staying in hotel motels. It also includes the double dub situation due to an economic hardship or some other reason that they're displaced. It includes unsheltered folks. So families are on the streets. We know this is happening. We've had families sharing that this is their experience. And then families living in shelters, transitional housing, and rapid rehousing are also eligible for McKinney-Vento services for the school year that they are identified in. We receive our referrals from schools and community partners, and families are also self-referring. Students are self-referring for unaccompanied homeless youth in the Denver Public Schools boundaries. And so we do an intake with them and we ask them these questions in the most sensitive way that we can, still preserving their dignity, and just determine their eligibility based on, essentially where they slept the night before. And then, like I said, students are entitled to services for the whole school year, which ends June 30th, of every year. And then, I'm sorry, you also asked me, how do we serve students? What services we provide? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it would take you half an hour to explain all of it. I've been onto your website and we can put it in the chat. But like in a general sense, if
Mhm.
someone has a family or has a student or knows someone, what can they expect to get from the Homeless Education Network to assist them?
Yeah, so students are entitled to stay in their school of origin. So let's say they become unhoused during the school year. We will make sure that they have any transportation that they're eligible for to accommodate them staying at their school. Families are also able to immediately enroll in the school that's closest to them. So if they become sheltered on the opposite side of town and they want to enroll in those schools, we will be able to help them with that and get them enrolled. So everything that we focus on is around education. So whatever's going to get that student in that seat to, even get basic needs met, because there's food at schools, in addition to just to academic, right? Stuff. There are also, social emotional needs that are being met. They're building relationships with school staff and kids, peers, kids their age. So all of that we're in support of, and we have kind of just depending on funding, our department is federally funded, but we also have access to competitive funding, sometimes from private sources, sometimes local and state sources as well. Sometimes we get donations of shoes, and so we have that. We do have right now like winter accessories to make sure our families have something for the elements, to bear the elements. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, any other services. We also make sure that now school lunches are free, but we still just make sure that they're identified as McKinney-Vento, because kids can still be charged for meals. They have the option of choosing up to 5 meal items, so like an entree, a side, and juice or milk. And if the kid chooses 2 items, then they get charged for the full meal, which is weird. I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me, but it happens. And so we would cover the cost of that. But again, we're reporting them to the Food and Nutrition Services Department to make sure that they're not being billed for those meals that they take, Yeah, so that's kind of, a little bit of everything. We provide community referrals to internal agencies, departments, and teams that can help families, as well as external. Anything like Salvation Army is helping us with housing for some families who are eligible. So any other external partners, if you want to get on that list, please contact me. If you have stuff to offer our families, happy to take it.
Thank you. So Kayla, you work at the Penrose Library in Colorado Springs. We heard a little bit about the services you provide. And we know that there's a lot more services here in Denver. We heard from some of our other panelists for people experiencing homelessness generally than in other places in Colorado. Can you tell us how you think the experiences of your patrons might differ from those in Denver, or different ways in which you maybe collaborate with local partners and agencies locally?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing that came to mind with this question is we have in a lot of the areas of service, one of everything. We have one shelter for individuals. We have one shelter for families. We have one shelter for youth. We have one soup kitchen. So in such a spread out county, that means that the best way to serve those people who need those services is to concentrate them in one area so that they can get from shelter to the soup kitchen. Or if, this family has to split up, they're not too far from one another. But that makes it really hard in a huge county for everyone to access that. It's nearly impossible for someone who's in rural homelessness to access the services because they would have to come into the city and come downtown to access a lot of that. So that was the first way I really saw that that's a big difference for us. The other thing is, yes, there is this concerted effort to make things accessible to people experiencing homelessness where they're already at. But to connect them to services to try and help them get out of homelessness. So getting them connected to food stamps, getting them connected to Medicaid, some of those services, the service is unreachable for them. It's, from our downtown location, 6 or 7 miles uphill. That's not walkable for people. So the library fortunately is able to get a grant to provide bus passes to people for things like that, where we know they have an appointment on the other side of town because that's where their provider is, or they do need to go to the human services office to connect to resources there. But it's really unfortunate to see some of those things play out for our patrons and try to get them to places, even saying, the closest nonprofit is 3 miles in another direction from where they need to go for some other service. So it can be really disheartening to try and get people the services they need. Apologize. And often it takes a week to get them all the services they need if they've got a list of things to do. So those are just some of the ways I see it playing out.
Thank you for sharing. And that's such a part of all this, right? Is that people people complain about visible homelessness, but people stay in certain areas where there's a lot of services, and that's very common. But on the other hand, a lot of people also like to stay where they're originally from. If you were in, a more rural part of El Paso County, or maybe a more outlying part of Denver, when people start to experience homelessness, they don't want to move from their neighborhood. They're still in their neighborhood. That's where their park is. That's where they're used to being, all their services, their grocery store. And so it's very complicated when services are all in one place, but it's also very complicated if it's a 7-mile walk uphill. So I think it's something that a lot of house people don't think about regularly, and really appreciate you like jumping into that. Speaking of going from place A to place B, Director Rusha, some other transit agencies, outside of Colorado, do unhoused outreach, maybe have the types of community resource services, more like what our librarians here are talking about. And they don't, those other cities maybe don't always see it. Transit is just something to get people from point A to point B, but rather a place to, to help any and all neighbors who are utilizing the service. Can you tell us sort of what RTD is attempting to do at present, and maybe what you personally would like to see as efforts in the future?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Sorry, I had to make sure I was unmuted. So currently we have one contracted outreach worker in Jefferson County, and that was funded through a federal grant that expires at the end of this year. We also have a contract with Well Power in Denver for 4 more mental health professionals, and that contract will expire at the end of this year. Unfortunately, those positions have gone unfilled for many months, I think for over a year now. We're budgeting for a similar plan for next year. However, I do want to be clear that our official policy is to not hire in-house mental health or outreach workers. So our position is that we're a transit agency, and that we're here to move people from A to B, and that this type of service just isn't in our wheelhouse. And I say our wheelhouse because even though that's not my position, I am on the board of directors, and so I will take responsibility for what the agency's position is, if that makes sense. At the same time, I think I find that interesting when we say that, because we do have a police department, and it's a police department that is part of our plan, our strategic plan, that we'd like to grow from about 25 officers to 140 officers. We also have a marketing department. We have various support departments. Not every department in a transit agency is going to be operators, or maintenance. And so what you'd asked, what I would like to see. What I would like to see is that I'd like to see our agency match our police recruitment efforts. I think that RTD should actually create a department and hire a public health professional to run that department. And we could have mental health workers, social workers, and perhaps even EMTs under that person, professionals um, whose work is in their wheelhouse, who can offer that support that our operators are asking for, that the community is asking for, that our customers are asking for. I think that'd be a great benefit to the agency. And if we're not able to do that right now, because our nonprofit partners aren't able to staff and they have their own staffing needs, then I think that's something that we need to look at doing internally. We would have more control over the hiring process. We can pay a more competitive wage, and so forth and so on. You asked about what other transit agencies do. For me personally, I take a more of an abolitionist approach to public safety, which just means that I believe we should be focusing on policies that help people as opposed to punitive policies that focus on punishment. Earlier, we talked about the code. Now, community transit in Puget Sound actually does a really great job of seeing opportunity where others might have seen conflict. Okay, so for their code of conduct, if you are unhoused or economically insecure and you can't follow a rule on the basis of being barefoot because you can't afford shoes, or you cannot access a shower because you don't have a home, or pay your fares because you don't have money, then community transit will actually connect you with a social worker. It's actually in their code of conduct. It's part of their policy. And so, in my research in what other transit agencies are doing with their code of conduct, I saw that and I thought, wow, why don't we try something like that? So one thing I did fight for this summer was to keep our warning policy for fares evasion. Up until this year, we had a warning. If you're not able to produce a ticket, and some people actually lose their ticket, we'll give you a warning, and then if you're caught again, then you might get a citation. And I also wanted information about our discount fares programs, which we do have, written on every single suspension, right? Like, so now, no matter who you are, you will get information about our low income fares pass, our disability discount, our senior discount passes. And I lost on both of those counts, but I'm going to keep fighting for policies like that. And something else that we do have is real estate. We have a lot of real estate. So, for example, in Anchorage, there's a downtown transit center. It's really big. It's very busy, and there's a drop-in youth center called the Power Teen Center, and it's like right there off of all the bus lines, and kids can drop in. It's free. They can get a snack. They have access to resources. They have a place to go in the afternoon and weekends and after school. I mean, that's something that I would like to see RTD do, where we're not necessarily providing a service, but we have an asset that we can provide to the community. And while we do have assets, that we will lease, they are at market value. And I can't help but to wonder, do we have assets that are being underutilized? And could we, sell or lease those assets as a community benefit? Because, again, we are a public service. So those are just a couple of ideas that I think that we could look at other agencies to emulate, and I'd like to see us try.
Thank you for that. That was such a wonderful and comprehensive list. And I think outside of what a lot of people think of when they think of what transit agencies can do. And I can tell from all the, hearts and claps here that other people agree with you. So it's really nice. Some of us don't know what the options are outside of Denver. So it's great to hear about those. If you do have the resources of how people can be eligible for the discounted codes and anything, and you want to share them here or in our follow-up email, please do. Because I think a lot of people also don't know about that opportunity. So
yes.
Thank you. So I want to go back to Esther and then perhaps after Esther answers, Kayla and Brianne, you may be able to jump in as well. just talking specifically about children, you know, we know that housing security and homelessness is traumatic for those experiencing it, but especially for children. What advice would you give to folks on how best to assist children and neighbors or themselves who are experiencing homelessness? Or do you have any specific stories that you think help to illustrate, you know, how you were able to assist families in your work? And start with Esther. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes. So we are right now, we're seeing an influx of migrants who, because of their shelter stay, and some of them are unhoused, unsheltered, are eligible for McKinney-Vento status. And it's something for some of our educators in our schools that is very new to them, being someone with family who has lived experience with immigrating to this country. I kind of know a few things that like tips that have been helpful, and honestly getting them to school in a structured and consistent setting where things are like very much on the clock, right? That helps kids tremendously, right? Like some families are asking about accessing mental health services, so they will ask for counseling and connections to Wellpower, or if there's Medicaid funding for Medicaid, students who are eligible for Medicaid, can schedule request an appointment with a mental health provider. I know I've heard that it is pretty backed up, like the demand is pretty high, so it's been kind of challenging for families to get appointments. So something that the McKinney-Vento team here at DPS is working on is to do groups. So we have a consultant we'll be working with who will be developing a model. Well, actually she already has it developed, but it's like self-care, self-love, self-worth. She has a lot of different aspects to this model she created, and she has conversations with youth in a group setting who have experienced trauma, and this she's done before with loss. And I think a conversation we had around loss is it's not just the death of a loved one or someone you cared about or someone in your family. It's around the loss of housing. There is a grieving process with it, and so helping kiddos with that loss, and giving them a space where they're around their peers and they can build their own network within the school, is a form of trauma-informed practice that we're going to pilot this year. And yeah, we have some schools that are significantly impacted, and we're looking at working predominantly with the high school population, with the middle and high school populations, because a lot of our youngest kiddos are so resilient. I'm not really sure how they process homelessness. I would love to learn more about experts on this call about that, because some of them are just amazingly resilient, and I'm like, where does that come from? Because I feel like sometimes I don't even have that, right? Like willpower. And some of our kids, the migrants who have come thousands of miles, we have little ones in preschool and kindergarten. And 6 months ago, they were fleeing their country, running for their lives. And they're here and going to school every day with a smile on their face. And I see them walking down the halls when I go and visit schools. And there's just, the structure really is quite therapeutic. A lot of the services that we provide, it's not therapy, but it alleviates a lot of pressure from parents and families. And like, there's almost like a deep sigh of relief that, I've experienced in therapy. So I know that the families, it really, really helps them a lot deal with, the stress of trying to figure out how to get the kid to and from school or where they're going to go to school. So yeah, I think that's the way that we're kind of supporting in that area, with mental health services that are non-traditional routes of mental health services, just because those are a little bit hard to access right now.
Thank you. Brianne, do you have any insights with children, or are you mostly working with adults in your work, or do you have divisions within the staff perhaps?
At Denver Public Library, my program works mostly with adults, but also supports families experiencing homelessness. Something that we do regularly here is connect families to McKinney-Vento. Lots of folks come in, they're experiencing homelessness. They don't even know that exists. And it's been really a really great experience to say, hey, exists, let's get you connected. And it really takes a lot of weight off of parents' shoulders. The other thing that I wanted to say with RTD, we see a lot of unsheltered folks, especially at the central library, that are unable to use the shelter system. And when we get into cold weather, what is so valuable to our patrons is to be able to hand them an RTD ticket and know that they're going to be able to be on the bus for a few hours and out of the cold. And it's just so supportive to have that service here in Denver. So thank you guys both for what you do.
Kayla, do you have anything to add? It's totally okay if it's not, if you don't have anything on it.
I think that everyone's kind of covered what I would have said at this point.
Awesome, thank you. So now that we've kind of talked on, all three of these areas, the libraries and education and transit, I'd love to just ask sort of, are there underutilized areas for collaboration between you all? It sounds like we already have some between Denver Public Library and the HEN folks here in Denver. What can you all do to collaborate? And also those of us who work in the homelessness sector, are there ways that we can better be connected to, to those folks who are officially working in the sector of homelessness and have direct resources? We're all here on the same call. So if anybody has thoughts on ways that we all can improve, I'd love to have a conversation. Go for it. Anybody, Director Risha, just jump on in.
Here, I couldn't find the hand button. So as I noted, so we do have discount programs, and we have like an incredible marketing development team who runs much of that. And they will do like train the trainer programs. They will do outreach. It's a small staff, and RTD, spans over 2,000 square miles and 3 million people. And so but I have never been told no when I've asked for assistance or a resource, and they have told me many times, hey, if you know of an organization or a group that you would like us to speak to, we'll do a Teams, we can come out there, we can do an event. So I just wanted to, to put it out there that RTD does do that kind of outreach. And particularly, when there are organizations that would just like to learn more about how they can help their clients or their patrons. I think that's another way to like kind of get the word out. It also, I think, helps us to get that feedback from partners and social services organizations, and like, hey, this thank you for the service you're offering, but and I'm not saying this is a thing, but if you had the feedback, but in the application process, we find this is difficult or whatever, there's kind of like that loop that continues, because government's government, and as we all know, like in applying for services, sometimes, we find there's red tape where there shouldn't be. And so I just kind of wanted to offer that for folks on this panel or who might be listening that aren't aware. RTD really does try to get out there and not just educate the community, but also just educate community partners and find new community partners and tell them about these programs and upcoming changes and things like that, and get that feedback. So those might be some potential opportunities that we have. And I don't know if maybe there's something more we can do, like with the Denver Public Library, because I know for the low income fares program, like Denver Department of Human Services can actually help people enroll on the phone. So maybe there's a way we can kind of tighten up that link. So be happy to talk offline, but just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, I'll move to another question, but if something pops to mind, please feel free to jump in. We really want to just be having a, conversation and no wrong answers. So one of the questions, we'll jump to the Q&A, and please keep putting them in the Q&A, but I'll go back and forth with those and some of the pre-planned questions just to make sure we get to everything. We had a question about, are there requirements for hygiene in services? And I'm not sure if that's in relation to libraries or education, but are there any requirements regarding hygiene just in case we have a client who's looking for services?
Is that to get hygiene items, or is that a question regarding hygiene, or should I give both answers?
Let's go both. I read it
Okay.
as do you need to be meeting some sort of hygiene threshold to be welcomed in the library, welcomed on the bus, welcome with services? But I think it would be helpful to know if there's hygiene products available for people as well.
Yeah, at the central library, we do have emergency hygiene items. So lots of different things. You just have to ask for somebody in our program, and we're happy to help with that. From a hygiene standpoint of accessing Denver Public Library, everyone is welcome. The only reason why someone would get turned away is if there is a biohazard issue that's going to be blood, feces, or urine, and that we're not able to basically fix that issue that day so that they're welcome in. If somebody is asked to leave based on this type of biohazard issue, then they're asked to leave. Sorry, the library announcement. They're
The
asked to
library
leave.
never stops working. Yeah.
They're asked to leave for that day, but they can come back the next day to access the library.
We have some similar policies. I would say ours is a little more strict. So yes, the same biohazard problems would have someone turned away or asked to leave. But we do also have in our code of conduct that if their bodily odor is so strong that it is a nuisance to other patrons and causing it to be difficult for other patrons to access our services, then they will also be asked to leave for the day. Up through the end of this year, we do have hygiene kits available to hand off to someone to say, here's a way to rectify the issue. You're welcome to come back tomorrow if the problem is solved. But unfortunately, our funding has ended through the El Paso County Public Health Department. So we aren't going to have that option starting next year to hand them a solution along with the asking them to leave for the day. So it is unfortunate, but up until then, up until the end of this year, we have had a solution for that problem.
I'll just say, sometimes folks are looking for ways to help and get involved. Hygiene kits are a great way to assist. So we do take hygiene kit donations here at the coalition. Sounds like the folks down in Penrose Library could use some donations if you're in that area or driving through. And people also often make hygiene kits to just keep in their car, keep on the train with them, and hand to folks. So especially as winter comes, warm socks, little bits, toothbrush, toothpaste, really valuable. And we do have a list on our website, or maybe Shannon or Andrew, you can link to it in our chat, some of the winter items that we recommend for people. And everyone's way of helping neighbors is different, and that's a nice, easy way to sort of, if you have the money and the resource to do so, to be able to create little Ziploc bags with resources and be able to assist folks. We had a question in the chat that's similar to one that we had planned, so I'll kind of combine them. We were going to ask about how do you provide training for staff to ensure that they understand how to work with unhoused neighbors, people experiencing homelessness. I heard a lot about trauma-informed care. And then in the chat, we had a question from Angelique about specifically training with bus drivers. So maybe I'll start with Director Rusha, and then we'll move on and see if others have answers about how their training helps staff to serve folks.
I apologize because I caught the second half of your question.
I'll put it in, I'm going to repeat it a little louder and a little slower, and then we'll go from there. So the question is regarding how staff is trained in order to serve people experiencing homelessness. Sometimes a trauma-informed lens is relevant. I've heard from others in the conversation. And then specifically in the chat, someone asked about training with bus drivers or others who work sort of directly with folks from the transit perspective. So hopefully I captured that well. If I missed anything, somebody add it in the chat.
All right, am I up on first? Okay, thanks. So thank you for your question. I did check into this, and I'll give you the best answer I can, but I do want to warn it's not an official RTD answer. So to my knowledge, I know our operators are not given specific trauma enforced training. And the reason why I'm fairly confident in my response is because operators have told me that they would like to have this kind of training. So I have not seen our operator book. Like, our operators get essentially a book. It's like this thick, their training manual. But this has come up in individual conversations. And they have, folks have said to me that they would like to get some more training. And operators have also, some of them, I can't speak for all, have also, just expressed a desire to see, again, like the community resource support, because they do see them as resource staff. It doesn't mean that other staff in the agency don't get some training. The board has not been apprised of what that training looks like. I do think that the intent is there, but I don't know of a specific, like, say, SOP, if that makes sense, or a specific, like, policy. But to my knowledge, is on the operator level, there might be some training in like de-escalation, but I think a lot of it is call a supervisor, and learn on the job. I think it's the model.
Esther, I'm going to throw to you because you showed up off camera, so I think you're ready to go.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So, one thing that we are doing, so I've been in my role about 7 months, and I've been working on having a facilitator come who has lived experience, and also many connections in the space of the unhoused population. So with her, it's going to be a series of workshops that we do over a significant amount of time, all in the effort of building a model that helps people in my role and on our team build a partnership with the families. Because of this person's lived experience, it's something that I feel like, coming from her perspective, like what's going to work, what's not going to work. And yeah, having a space to do more of a workshop and build the work as we go, like learn and build at the same time, I think will be really helpful. I think everyone on our team has a passion for helping the unhoused, but I feel like we approach it different. We all have kind of different ideas. So being able to learn from this facilitator about her experience and create a model that hopefully will be left behind, after I'm here and someone else is here, etc. I think that would be something we can, leave for the work here, because so much of what we do, it's federally regulated, right? We're a federal program, and so there's a lot of red tape. So there's things that we have to do within 24 hours, and we have to do this during the school year, and we have to document and track and do all these things. But how do we do it in a way that builds a partnership and really, honors the family still in spite of what they're going through, and the students. So yeah, that's kind of PD that we're working on. And then we also just try to keep up with anything in the space of working with unhoused populations that's like innovative and different. We went to a webinar with our team yesterday around the Stay Over program that they have in San Francisco, where they're utilizing the school's gym to provide overnight shelter for families for 12 hours. And we thought, man, if they're doing it in San Francisco, why can't we do that here? And so kind of threw that out there to our leadership today. And we'll see where it goes. Anybody on this call also wanting to learn more about that or knows more about it and has any contacts or education for us, please reach out. So that's, yeah, I'm just kind of, I think that we can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results, and our families don't fit into these boxes that we like to check off and put them in. And so definitely open to new ideas and any PD around that, but also just including the people who are experiencing living this. We actually had an idea today about including unaccompanied homeless youth and as part of our work to be able to do outreach. They don't want to listen to us. Yeah. So, and I think we have so much to learn from them and what they're experiencing. So, yeah. Thank you.
I know here at the library, we do provide, specifically from our department, we do provide the trauma-informed care approach training to our staff members. And that can be a really wide overview for all staff. And then potentially more concentrated information in different departments or different branches, depending on how that actually plays out. Because each branch has a totally different population, so it could look slightly different each place. I also am housed with our safety and security department. So my direct supervisor is the chief safety, community resources, and security officer. So we provide direct training to the security officers. And then district-wide, we offer, CPR, AED, first aid, crisis prevention intervention training, which helps with de-escalation tactics, Narcan training, things like that. So we try to provide as much information to our staff as possible to work with our patrons and make sure that everyone's able to stay safe.
Denver Public Library does a lot of the same trainings that Kayla just named for her library system. Something that Denver Public Library has started this year is using a new training system for our employees for crisis de-escalation. So this year we have trained 200 of our frontline staff members on crisis de-escalation, and next year we will do 300. The thought being that if we can de-escalate some incidents, more incidents in the library, then less folks will be suspended and we're able to keep more folks in the library. We know that lots of folks who are experiencing homelessness will come in hungry, they'll come in tired, they might be triggered easily. And if our staff have the tools to de-escalate situations more easily, then we will be able to continue to welcome everyone into our libraries.
Thanks. So I just want to ask someone to follow up on what I said before. So there was a previous question about what we were doing internally, and I did want to recognize that we do have a relationship, in Denver with DDPHE and the STAR program. So we do utilize STAR in that we have a partnership with the city, and so we do use city resources. And as I kind of hinted before, I like us to see us build kind of our own program. I do think that as we provide a major service to the city, that and the city has the resources, they can share that resource with us. But we also have resources as well, so we can certainly add to that. And in terms of de-escalation, like there is a balance. And it kind of depends on what we mean by de-escalation. There also is a balance. With our operators, we don't want to put our operators in a position where they might be hurt. And I'm not suggesting that, just because someone is in crisis, it means that they are dangerous. Not at all. But, there are any number of situations that can occur on public transit, all of our system at any given day. And so I think that, the approach has kind of been to be hands off. And so when we say de-escalation, I'm not sure what exactly that means. What I will say though is that I do get emails and calls and people tell me of good things that they see, right? Whether it's a supervisor, an operator, and one of our security staff or RTD PD, like stepping up and going out of their way to help somebody who was in need. That does happen, absolutely. So I don't want to disparage our staff. In fact, I want to lift them up. This work is really hard and it can be traumatizing. It can be traumatizing to our customers, and it can be traumatizing to staff, right? And so my position, I'm speaking as me as individual director. Hi, I'm Joanne. I like to ride the bus. Thanks for having me. I'm not speaking about the agency, but I really truly think that we just need to give our operators and our support staff more tools in the toolbox, right? And so I just wanted to kind of come back and and I don't know if it's clarify or just kind of or just add, to my previous statements. I feel like it came down a little bit hard on our team, and I don't want to. It's not about that, but these are policy conversations, and so I was speaking my truth. But again, our team does work really hard, and I want them to be successful because their success is our success. Ultimately, though, as a long-term transit writer, as a parent, as a person who used to work um, in the mental health space. um, I just I see a real need for more tools in the toolbox. And so anyway, I just wanted to clarify. But thanks for giving me an extra couple minutes. And I just appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So we are running up on time, so I just want to give everyone the opportunity. If you just have like a final thought of maybe it's resources you recommend, maybe it's how to get involved, maybe it's just something that you would like to see changed. And hey, you got the forum to say it. Just give everyone a chance to say something, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Just a couple minutes late, but hopefully you'll stick with us. So whoever would like to start.
I can hop in. One thing that I did want to say, right now, because of construction at the central library, we've been pretty limited on our hours and what we can provide. Next year, when the library is fully reopen again, we are excited. We will be planning on bringing in other service providers to the library to help out with providing resources. It's one of our big things for next year when the library reopens. We will also have our own service point, which we didn't prior to construction. So we're really looking forward to the future and partnering with other organizations here in Denver to really support people experiencing homelessness.
I'm going to take a little bit more of a social work approach for this and say, please, everyone vote, because our funding is based on taxpayer dollars. And when that goes down, then our services have to go down. And we have people who are in, elected positions that aren't seeing these trauma-informed approaches or supporting our services. It really makes it difficult for us to achieve these goals. So get out there and vote and make a difference in your community.
Yeah, double that. Yeah, for us, I think my colleague Charlton put it in the chat. Partner with us. Our team, the majority of us are under 1 year in our roles, and so we really would love to hear from other folks, just anything innovative. I feel like, in education, we do things a lot of the same and perpetuate same cycles of inequitable access to education, high quality education for all. So I'm happy to hear from all of you. If you have some ideas of anything we can do different to get kids to school, that's super important to stay connected for them to the school serving as their hubs, where they can get a lot of their needs met, not everything, but a lot of what they need to get through the day at the very least. So yeah, happy to hear from anybody. Just please partner with us and let us know, how we can help you. And, yeah, thank you.
For me, I would just say, again, our discount fare programs. I mean, RTD, the board of directors just voted to slash fares again. Those will go into effect sometime probably in February, once we get the back end stuff figured out in IT. That will also include our paratransit, our Access-a-Ride, which is a really big deal. So if you are low income individual, which means 250% of the federal poverty level, your monthly pass will be $27 a month. It is a big deal. And we are here to help folks get signed up. So again, friends, partners, community members, individuals, if you find that there are barriers to access in getting signed up for that program, please let RTD know, let your board of directors know, because we want to get everyone signed up who is qualified. That is something that folks are entitled to if they qualify. I don't want anybody overpaying ever. And I've personally helped people get signed up. So, directors are also there to be customer service. Email us. And if someone doesn't answer, email me. I'll help you out. So I put my information in the chat, and I'm sure if you're in the community and you want to find me, go to the board of directors, has a page on the RTD website. But please, we're there to help, and we are also elected as well. So, so I echo Esther, I believe it was, who said vote. And then I also there are a lot of misconceptions about unhoused, and that hurts people, and that can kill people. And so I just, want to remind, I think people on this panel know, but anybody else in the audience, everybody belongs to somebody, and this feeling that some folks don't belong, that hurts our neighbors. And so I would just ask, when you hear folks, saying disparaging things about the unhoused, if you hear something, say something. It also helps our work too. But anyway, thanks for having me, and thanks for this wonderful panel. I learned a lot.
Well, thanks to you all for coming. It was a really wonderful conversation. I think it could have gone an hour longer, but we try to keep it, to our 75-minute plan. Gabrielle, if you can go ahead and share the slide. Oh, she was on it. So just want to point out, next month we'll have our last session of the year. It's on Native Americans and homelessness. We're really excited about this conversation. And it's a topic I don't believe we've covered in the education series before. December, we will not have a session. We'll be having the vigil, though, on December 21st, as we do every year, the longest night of the year at the City and County Building here in Denver. And we honor those who died in the calendar year from experiencing homelessness. So please mark your calendar for that on December 21st. Thank you to everyone who came today. I apologize if we didn't get to your questions. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and feel free to follow up by email if you have additional questions. And as always, we know that this is how you're choosing to spend your evening, and that's such an amazing thing. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone being really participatory today with all the likes. It's been great to know what's hitting. So thank you. So yeah, we hope to see you next month. You'll get a follow-up email. Please take the survey. Tell us what you want to see in the Ed series. We haven't started planning next year's yet, and we want to know what you like and what you didn't like in different sessions. And we really want to make sure this is a resource for community and helpful to you and what you need to know. So please do fill out our survey. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month.